Welcome, ladies and gents. Chris Andre here. You can find me at BetBoxing on Twitter for boxing-related tweets, or you can subscribe to the channel, click that notifications button, and get a new notification whenever a new video is uploaded. So, about an hour ago, I did another video where I was talking about Mark Tibbs and Billy Joe Saunders and the tactical disagreement they may have had with regards to the fight against Canelo Alvarez, and I was asking everybody's opinion on who do you agree with in terms of their tactical approach for that fight. But I'm going to upload this video tomorrow, so by the time you guys see this, it will be the following day, so that I don't saturate the channel and, you know, split the views, so to speak. So this is over something that has happened earlier tonight. We've seen a little Twitter war. So basically it's a bit of a roundup of a bunch of things that are going on in the heavyweight division at the moment. And we've seen a bit of a Twitter war, shall we say, between Anthony Joshua and Tyson Fury. AJ put out a tweet to say, "Tyson Fury, the world now sees you for the fraud that you are. You let boxing down. You lied to the fans and led them on. Used my name for clout, not a fight. Bring me any championship fighter who can handle their business correctly." Tyson Fury then responded with, "You're more full of shit than Eddie, spouting absolute shite. Your team knew full well there was an arbitration going on. It was out of my hands. But I tell you what, if I'm a fraud, let's fight this weekend, bare knuckles till one man quits. Let's put up 20 million each." Now, obviously, that's just bluster from Fury, but I think Anthony Joshua wound him up a little bit. He got under his skin. And AJ responded with, "If there was an arbitration going on, why announce to the world that we're fighting? The fight was signed for undisputed. Bare knuckle. You're a good kid. Don't play with me, Luke. I'll slap your bald head and you'll do nothing, waste man." At which point Tyson Fury replied, "Not going into the details online. You'll slap me about, will you, Dossa? Please come and try, bum. I'm waiting. Femi, aka Bottle Job, 24/7, 365, ready. I'll smoke Wilder first, then you will get yours as well." Right? I'm loving this, by the way. But there was also Deontay Wilder and Tyson Fury going at it, of course, especially, well, Fury going at Wilder in a manner that was very confrontational on his Instagram stories. Tyson Fury wrote to Deontay Wilder in one of the stories, well, two stories, "What a joke the Bronze Bomber has become. Asked for 20 million to move over. Hashtag Joker. Looks like I have to crack his skull again. And no excuses, but costume was too heavy. Fury's gloves were loaded. I had weak legs. My water was spiked. Fury's gloves had no padding. Had bicep surgery. I was a zombie. Disloyal trainer. Complications in camp. I had an autopsy. I broke my arm. Fight stopped too early. Andre Darrell's fault. Ref did a shit job. Snakes in the grass. Dent in my head. Egg weight in the glove. Fury was covered in oil. Ricky Hatton pulled the glove down. I injured my bicep. I broke my hand. Fury's fist wasn't in the glove. Fury took peds. Fury did voodoo magic. I had the flu. I was food poisoned." So clearly they're all going off at each other. And yeah, and it's obviously getting very exciting now, if you ask me, in my humble opinion. It adds a bit of spite to the whole, you know, as Joe Briggs basically said when he tweeted me. He said, "Listen, the top three have genuine beef now, and I'm loving it. I'm with you, Joe, man. It's brilliant. I love it. There seems to be genuine animosity there." But let's talk about what this means for the wider picture, rather than just a banter of the build-up. Let's actually think about what this potentially means, and then we'll also talk about Alexander Usyk and how the interruptions in preparation may have affected each and every fighter. Maybe you don't think it will affect outcomes of fights at all, but there are some things we need to think about because there's a possibility it might. So I'm going to ask you guys your opinions on this. Now, here's where the stuff gets, I guess, a little bit more complicated, okay? Wait, before we get into that part, let's talk about the fact that what are the motives here? Is Anthony Joshua correct? Do you think that Tyson Fury knew all along? Have they just been playing them? You know, the fan bases seem to be split here as to why there's been this reaction. You've got the Anthony Joshua fans who feel that this is a clear indication that Tyson Fury never had any intention of fighting Anthony Joshua, that this was essentially part of a wider duck. You have the Tyson Fury fans who are taking Fury's position and saying, look, he obviously wants to fight for the undisputed. This is an inconvenience on his behalf. And Anthony Joshua is just panicking now because he knows he has to fight a huge threat in Alexander Usyk. And this is why the AJ fans are furious, because they feel that Tyson Fury is going to dispose of and demolish Deontay Wilder in great fashion, while they feel that Usyk is a potential real threat to Anthony Joshua, hence the panic. I've also seen people that are more neutral and impartial, that don't really affiliate with either side and are just analysing this. People like Hatman, who have come out and they've said that basically it's a method of inconveniencing, not just Anthony Joshua, but Matchroom and Eddie Hearn. You know, at the end of the day, if they've spent a lot of money trying to build this up and then it's going to end up costing them, there's a cost involved in that. That is essentially affecting the finances of one of your major rivals. Now, obviously, the richer your rivals get, the more success they have. They're continually expanding. Matchroom has now moved to various nations, Italy, Australia. They're opening up markets in Uzbekistan. They're going all over the world. They're going global. And they're literally, as Eddie Hearn is saying, they're starting to look like they're taking over. So this might have been a way just to throw a little anchor on there to say, slow down. You're not going to leave us behind just yet. We're hoping to essentially catch you up. If our guys beat your guys, it's a spanner in the works. So maybe that's the motivation here. So let me know your position on this. Who knows what are the potential motives going on here? But the more important question I believe to ask is, what could potentially happen as a result of what has occurred in the build-up to these fights, in the actual fights themselves? Can anything potentially change by this increased level of animosity, by the fact that they were preparing for different types of opponents? Let's start off with talking about Deontay Wilder. One of the things you have to consider is, let's say for argument's sake that things are going drastically wrong for Wilder against Tyson Fury. He's involved in a fight and he's getting a shellacking. He's getting battered just like he did in the second fight. Now, what goes on in the corner's mind and in Deontay Wilder's mind, following the fact that Breland has been sacked, that he's gotten rid of JD, there have been all those accusations that we spoke about before that Tyson Fury listed in a very funny manner on his Instagram stories. With all those things going on, will Malik Scott have the balls to pull him out? You'd have to assume he wouldn't, right? Because you have to understand, it's not just the wrath of Deontay Wilder, it's the fans. The wrath of the fans, the accusations that have gone Breland's way. And these are things that you have to understand could potentially affect the career of Malik Scott moving forward as a guy who's involved as a trainer now. He's a retired fighter. And unlike Breland, he isn't a long-time retired fighter who achieved massive things as an amateur and a professional and now has developed a reputation as a trainer. So it could end up, potentially, if there are accusations of him being corrupt, affecting his reputation and his ability to work at a high level in the future. Okay, you don't know. Reputations can follow trainers around. The other thing you need to think about, though, is Deontay Wilder's mentality. Do you think Deontay Wilder believes the conspiracy theories, or is it an excuse? Because I've tried to figure this out, really, because, look, if he believes the conspiracy theories, actually, wait, if he believes it's an excuse, so he's just trying to win over his own fans. He doesn't want to lose that fan base, and he needs them to still believe in him. So he needs them to believe in some grand conspiracy so that not only do they not get off the Wilder fan train, but they actually emotionally invest even more. They feel like there's an injustice that has been done and they're going to want revenge, and they're going to be tuning in along with all their friends and family who they've told about this conspiracy about. And they're looking to, as a result, expand, so to speak, the product of Deontay Wilder from that position. Okay? If he doesn't believe the excuses, if he does believe the excuses, if he believes that genuinely there was a conspiracy against me, well, that's all well and good, because it won't affect his belief in himself. He will believe that when my water's not spiked, when I don't have a disloyal trainer who's looking to betray me, when Tyson Fury doesn't have egg weights in his gloves, when Andre Durrell isn't there ringside and trying to influence the corner because he has a relationship with Sugar Hill, when all these things, all these variables are eradicated, I'm going to emerge like Phoenix rising out of the ashes and take over this heavyweight division. But if he's getting that same shellacking, what happens? Because one thing you have to say is Deontay Wilder is a warrior. Many other heavyweights would have jacked it in that fight. In many other heavyweight fights prior to that, he was in a position where he was on the end of some, heavy shots, and he had to come through some crises on a number of occasions. And he's hung in there. So you can't ever deny Deontay Wilder's warrior heart or his mentality. That's just a fact. Now, if he believes in the things that he's saying and he's still receiving the same level of beating, knowing that his corner have checked the wraps, they've checked the gloves, there's no spiking of water or anything like that, will that self-belief evaporate before him in the middle of the fight? And if so, might we see the unthinkable of Deontay Wilder quitting on his stool? If we don't see Deontay Wilder quitting on his stool, remember that a one-punch knockout can cause a level of injury. I mean, obviously, if it's a huge shot, it can really cause severe injury. But the majority of knockouts will cause a type of injury that equates to concussion, which will affect you in the following months or years. However, the injuries that tend to be more dangerous to your immediate health are the injuries where you're taking a consistent beating over the course of the night, where your head is experiencing consistent trauma. And as a result, it's not necessarily the one-punch knockout artists that end up seriously hurting fighters. It's the guys who are crisp punchers that land consistently without knocking you out over the course of the night. So we also have to ask ourselves, if he's not the type to quit, and Malik Scott will be too afraid to pull him out if that's necessary, then God forbid, are we looking at a situation where, God forbid, a tragedy could unfold? I mean, obviously, it's the last thing I'd ever want to see. But the reason I'm bringing this up is because I want there to be awareness of this, so that the doctor at ringside, at the very least, but also Malik Scott, need to have the bravery, if things are not going well, to be able to pull Deontay Wilder out of the fight. I mean, if they're really not going well. And it's very hard to do that when a guy has the punching power of Deontay Wilder, because you know you're 1 second away from turning the fight around and winning the fight. So it's going to take an incredible amount of bravery from the corner, but also an incredible amount of self-belief from Deontay Wilder not to quit on the stool if he believes the things he's been saying. If he's starting to get a battering, for him to say, you know what, I can turn this around, even though clearly there wasn't a conspiracy against me in the first place. So let me know what you think about that. Now, with regards to the preparations of the fights, Alexander Usyk has been preparing for Joe Joyce. Now, we know Joe Joyce is a very big, physically strong man. I personally believe, without knowing, this is just speculative, of course, that he's probably physically stronger than Anthony Joshua. Naturally speaking, he's got a bigger frame. Anthony Joshua isn't that broad. I've stood next to him, like I've said. I've seen him on a couple of occasions. He's not particularly broad. He's very tall. He's athletic. He's slim. He's got quite a slim build. He's not that wide sort of guy that you think, in a tug of war or a wrestling match that he would be a tank. Okay, he's more athletic in his build, but he's put muscle onto that frame. Whereas Joe Joyce is the bigger man, and I would assume, without knowing, because size doesn't always reflect this, but I would assume without knowing that Joe Joyce would be the physically stronger guy. I feel like he's more naturally heavy in terms of his frame. He's also, Joe Joyce, faster of foot, and he's more agile. I mean, to think of the size of Joe Joyce and the fact that this guy's dropping front flips in the ring, and so, it's unbelievable post-fight when he does these things. It's an incredible level of athleticism. But what he does have is actually slow hands, and we all know this, right? Well, Anthony Joshua may not be quite as physically strong, although I'm sure he is strong and stronger than Usyk probably in a clinch. And although he's not slow of foot at all, and I don't think he's quite as fast as Joe Joyce, he's not slow of foot, he's definitely got faster hands than Joe Joyce. He's got some of the fastest, most fluid combinations in the heavyweight division. So Alexander Usyk has been piling on the weight. And I think the last time he put up a photo of himself, a little video of himself, talking about the heavyweight division, one of his comedic videos, he was standing on a scale, and this was fairly recent. This was like in the last week, and if memory serves me correctly, he'd reached 234 pounds or somewhere around there, 235 pounds. Now, The question I'm asking is because he's been preparing for Joe Joyce and he's been thinking, look, however fast a foot he is, I'm going to be faster with my feet, right? But there'll come a point where he'll probably slow me down. So I'm going to need to build my physical strength. And even if it slows me down in terms of mobility a little bit, because of his slow hands, even if he catches up to me, I'm going to have the movement to be able to evade those shots. Whereas now with Anthony Joshua, he might not have the luxury of being able to be heavier because he might think to himself, look, I didn't need to pile on this weight, so to speak now. I don't need as much physical strength. But even if I do, what's more important is my ability to avoid the fast shots of Anthony Joshua, those fluid combination punches. In other words, do you think his preparation of bulking up will work against him? Bear in mind, although he's not a feather-fisted puncher, he's also not a monster puncher that's going to go out knocking these heavyweights out, right? So his weapon is his mobility, is his fluidity, is his understanding of angles and being able to exploit those gaps, being able to come in and draw shots to then counter you with. If he puts on too much weight and he slows down in that regard, it's almost counterintuitive into what he's trying to do. Okay, it doesn't necessarily mean that he's never going to be a big monster puncher, right? So you don't really want to try and turn yourself into that. You might need to add a little bit of muscle mass to deal with the physicality of certain fighters. But ultimately, his weapons are what he needs to maintain and keep sharp. He has those advantages over these other heavyweights. If he gives up those advantages, well, he's in trouble. So my question is, do you think he's going to be able now to drop a certain amount of weight? Or do you think that's even desirable? Maybe you're of the opinion that actually, regardless of who he's fighting in the heavyweight division, this guy does need to put on a bit of weight. He still has the foot speed advantage and the movement advantage over all the bigger heavyweights. So what difference does it make? One last thing I'll say as well is that don't sleep on the punching power of Gassiev. Gassiev is a big puncher, not just by cruiserweight standards, but by heavyweight standards, in my humble opinion. And if we haven't gotten to see it because of the whole COVID pandemic, but I believe when we start to see him really performing at heavyweight, you're going to see that power carry. And he was never in a position whereby he was overwhelmed by Gassiev's power. So this idea that he has to bulk up maybe to be able to absorb power, maybe that's just not accurate. Maybe it's literally for the clinches, because a lot of people are saying he's going to be able to handle a heavyweight's power. Well, he was able to handle Maris Briedis, who can punch, and Gassiev, who can really punch, at cruiserweight. So don't assume just because they're heavyweights they necessarily hit harder. Tyson Fury, there's more weight on the shot. You know, a clubbing shot from Chisora is heavier than what Gassiev will produce. But there's a difference, like I've said in the past, between thudding power and snapping power. And Briedis and Gassiev both have snapping power. So if he can take that, is there really, and he can take the clubbing power of Chisora, is there really anything to worry about with regards to the punching power of other heavyweights? So let me know what you think about all these variables. Do you think the preparation for the other heavyweights will also affect them? You know, Anthony Joshua perhaps less so, because one thing you'd have to say is that with Tyson Fury, AJ probably would have been preparing for mobility. This isn't a situation like Jarrell Miller where he bulked up preparing for an opposing fighter who's going to bring strength and power. Fury can bring that if he comes in heavy, of course. But I think the general consensus is that Fury will try and move. So Anthony Joshua might have been preparing for mobility. So as a result, Usyk might move even more fluidly than Fury. But of course, he will look to punch with Usyk and try and time him rather than have to chase him, because Usyk isn't as long. I mean, he will still have to chase him. Usyk's not going to come running into him. But the point I'm making here is that whichever way you look at it, he knew he'd be up against an elusive guy. So how much does he really have to change his preparations? Not as much as Usyk, I would assume. It's more likely to affect Usyk, if at all, right? So give me your opinion on that. Yeah, let me know what you think, guys. Thanks for watching. Chat to you soon. Take care. God bless. Now, just to add something to the end of this video, I'm adding it the morning after I did the initial video, just before I upload this. There have been a couple of developments. First and foremost, Anthony Joshua has put up another video. So there's a lot of back and forth now. He's showing the whole Tom Saunders incident again, and he's mocking Tyson Fury for saying he'd be involved in a bare knuckle fight when he wasn't even willing to climb the barrier. He says not even a bouncer was holding you back, it was the barrier. So this looks like it's going to escalate more and more in terms of the war of words. However, some people like Simon H, who follows me on Twitter, wrote directly to AJ to say, look at the punctuation in this particular tweet. Anthony Joshua blatantly didn't write that. He writes so differently on, I can't remember if he said Instagram or Snapchat, but he's questioning whether it's even them that are writing, or rather him that's writing these tweets. While Martin Theobald, who you can find at New Age Boxing UK, he's the guy, the very nice guy, who interviewed Steve Goodwin and I when we had that disagreement about health passports in boxing. He's actually tweeted to say, I doubt Tyson Fury or Anthony Joshua even know they're arguing on Twitter right now. Hashtag outsourced. In other words, the accounts maybe have been outsourced. So do you think this is just a ploy to build up the fight further, a potential fight in the future? Because it has got us all talking and it has got us excited. What I will say is this: if Anthony Joshua is behind this, I find it to be a very intellectual mind game. You know, everyone talks about Tyson Fury's mind games and stuff like that, but listen, this is smart, because when he's calling out Tyson Fury essentially and saying you're not about that life, which is basically what he's saying here, isn't it interesting how that was always the accusation levied at Anthony Joshua by Fury, by Deontay Wilder, by not Deontay Wilder, Dillian White. Dillian White was the one that started calling him Femi, saying he was a good boy that wasn't this type of guy. He's not about that life. It wasn't levied at Tyson Fury. So is Anthony Joshua questioning the warrior heart of Tyson Fury going to get under Fury's skin? Maybe it's a ploy to make Fury want to stand and trade at mid-range where Anthony Joshua excels if they ever do step in the ring together. Or maybe it's just a method of affecting his reputation, winding him up, irritating him, as Sun Tzu would have advised him to do to the enemy. But let me know what you think about this whole scenario and the psychological games that may be at play here, if they are indeed behind it. Thanks for watching, everyone. Take care. God bless.